Okay, let's talk about the main quest here then, and that is Tulin of Rito Village. And I think that before we even get started on that, it makes, I don't know, it's funny to me how even Nintendo had to admit to themselves, they're like, yeah, Teba's just like not that interesting. He's not that interesting, so
Aw.
we're gonna move on to someone else. And you and I have talked about that in years past when we talked about the new champions. Like I think like we kind of dogged on Teba and Yunobo a little bit,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that if you were to replace two champions, these two would have been the ones. But obviously, as we'll talk about in a little bit, they went a different direction with Yunobo, which was awesome. But they did replace Teba with and Tulin. I think is way better, if I'm being honest.
Okay, listen, I love Tulin, but there's a part of me that kind of like doesn't understand why they made that change because everybody else is pretty much the same. So it kind of feels like it doesn't fit, but it does. Like I don't know, it's weird. But so when it came down to getting Tulin and the reason why Teba couldn't like join you on your adventure, like I got it, I understood. But I like Teba. That made me kind of sad, but it made me happy too that he like basically he took over I believe Tonelli's line, which is like the
Yeah,
chief of the Rito, and he's like I gotta stay here with my people. Tulin's our best warrior. He'll go with you.
which like doesn't kind of like there are other champions who also take over like
Right.
responsibilities, and they're still like the
Yeah, they're
champion.
still they're still like yeah, chill with Link. So yeah, it was kind of like a weird change where I didn't I was when Catherine and I talk a lot about Zelda, but there are some things where she said she sees a change and she kind of squints at it and she's like, why? This is one of those changes. Like it does wind up being for the better, but it's just like why, you know?
I think the why is Teba. He's just not that interesting.
I love
I
Teba.
think
Like
that's
I thought he was
why.
great.
I think like of every champion in Breath of the Wild, let me specify, and every champion, Teba was the most similar to Rivali. Or like what am I trying to say? He was the most similar to like the previous champion. You know what I mean? Like Urbosa and
Yeah.
Riju were kind of close, but not that close. Daruk and Yunobo very different. Sidon and Mifa very different. I think Teba and Rivali were very similar in a lot of ways, which
And
made
I can
him
see that.
to me, it just made him kind of like a lesser version of Rivali without kind of the sass and the
Okay.
punch. So I think that's probably why they went in the different direction and were just like, you know what, Tulin, you're our guy because you're a cute little bird kid who is actually
He's
incredibly
still
helpful.
He is, yeah, and it's kind of funny that you say that because he does when you start, his quest line, he is a little big for his britches in that moment, until he needs help. But
Yeah,
he knows he's talented. He knows he's a skilled Rito warrior, and he kind of like is his I wouldn't say downfall, but he kind of gets himself into trouble, and then he realizes like, yeah, I do need help. I do need teamwork.
yeah, I agree. I really liked Tulin's story a lot actually, and like I guess let's just talk about it and let's get this quest going. So Tulin is like a prodigy. He is a prodigy with flying. He's a prodigy with the bow. He is like destined to be this fantastic Rito warrior, but he's still a kid and needs. I feel like you see this in a lot of stories where like the kid is clearly talented, but they just need time in order to get to where they're going to end up being.
Hmm.
And Tulin, like every kid ever, doesn't want to wait. He's ready to go now. So it starts off with you kind of exploring the Hebra Mountains, and for anybody that knows me, I have a real soft spot for Hebra Mountains. I don't know what it is. It's just like this quiet, desolate place that not a lot of people go. So I love kind of exploring around there. And Tulin, by God, this little kid has run off to chase down some what is it like some moblins or something like that, just some monsters or something.
Yeah, monsters in general.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he, as you succinctly said, he's bit off a little bit more than he could chew. So it's up to Link to go and rescue him, and that's where we kind of get our first little glimpse of this whole team up aspect of Tears of the Kingdom.
Hmm.
That I actually wasn't expecting this at all in this game, but I think it's awesome. Um,
I
but
would say
yeah,
like I would say from the trailer, I was kind of expecting it, but we just didn't. In my case, we didn't know like the extent.
Maybe that's a way to say it. Like I thought
Yeah,
it would kind of be similar to Breath of the Wild, where like you teamed up with your champion for like a little bit, and
yeah,
then
like
kind of went on your
pre-dungeon.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that is not the case at all. So yeah, so I thought that once you kind of teamed up with Tulin and he gave you his what is it, gust ability,
Um,
whatever it's called, the Tulin air boost or air gust or
yeah, I don't know if it really specifically has a name, but it's like Tulin's vow or whatever. He can like horizontally blow
right.
gusts of wind.
Yeah. So I think that once you kind of get that, and then you're like, okay, now we're gonna go to the dungeon. Then I think the story gets really cool, and you kind of hear the story about like the Stormark ship, and like this is the ship that we saw in the trailer, and
Hmm.
the bug that we saw in the trailer, which was indeed a dungeon boss.
Hmm.
This was not the first moment, but one of the first moments where I was just like, oh my god, this is awesome. As you kind of start ascending your way up to that ship, I think that this might so each dungeon has its own kind of like thing that you do before you actually get to the dungeon, right?
Hmm.
This is, if not my favorite, my second favorite. Oh god, you know what, maybe my third, I don't know. It was awesome, it was incredible.
Are
And
you
like
talking about for the game in general or just like for the series? Because I would say like
for this
these.
game and specifically,
Okay.
yeah.
I was gonna say like there's sometimes I know I've complained a lot about stuff you have to do before a dungeon where it feels like really big and kind of like it kills the momentum for me, but I've really liked it so far in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah,
It's fit really well. It doesn't kill the momentum for me at all.
I agree, and I think that like I almost factor that into like the
The
dungeon.
dungeon?
You know
Yeah.
how like if you're listening to the show for a long time, you know how Al and I always complain about getting to Stone Tower Temple in Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
This is like the
It's like
opposite of that. It's awesome and it adds to the dungeon. Like
it's so funny you say that because it's essentially the same thing, but
I know.
like it's better.
Oh, it's
I,
it's awesome. Uh, so yeah, so what you do like, and again, this is, you know how we said kind of last week, like the sky is it's very fun, but it doesn't feel kind of as fun maybe as the
as
depths,
substantial.
or yeah, like it's kind of, it's a little bit hard to get around, just I mean due to the nature of like, you know, you're in the sky and everything like that,
Hmm.
and you can't explore it as freely, you know, as freely as you can on the surface or in the depths. This is like peak sky, I think. Man, I had such a blast like using the gust and using like all like the trampolines and the springs and stuff like that to keep on going up up up. I was sitting down with my wife, and she was kind of watching me play, and I was just like, and when I got to the first shrine, because there's like 3 shrines along the way, and when I got to the first one I was like, oh my god, babe, like look at this, look how high up I am. And she was like, wow. And I kept on going up, and the second one I was like, oh my god, like we are like crazy high. And then the last one I was like, I was just like, oh my god, like this is insane. Like we cannot possibly keep on climbing up any higher.
Hmm.
But we did, and man, I thought that this portion was so fun. Like, and this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the Tulin quest. Here is like basically ascending your way up to get to the Storm Arc ship, and I thought, for me, this was like the first moment in the game where I was just like, the sky is awesome. Like this is so much fun. So I really enjoyed like making my way up.
Yeah, and I want to say beyond like the Great Sky Island where you start and you do like your little plateau, your tutorial, I feel like if you kind of go as the game guides you directly to the Rito, this is kind of your first way of navigating your way up into the sky,
Yeah.
unless you did any exploring beforehand, which I didn't. So I was kind of wanting to get like one or two abilities before I started my exploring. So I feel like, yeah, for a lot of people, this is their first time really experiencing how to navigate getting up there. And the fact that it's so high and you can use your little buddy Tulin to get around, and the trampolines are so cool.
Oh my
That was
god.
like, well, and they're just like the sails of the boats, but like turned horizontally so that you bounce up and you are just going so high. It's so cool. And I know I have to go back there and explore and get Koroks that I missed, but like
Oh.
it's like I'm excited to do that because it was such a fun time. And I can understand people thinking that maybe it took a long time. Like it was a very long segment, but I feel like I feel like I wasn't bored at all, like, or felt like it was long. I was enjoying every step of the way. And the
I agree.
music getting up there was fantastic.
I was like captivated, like making my way up there. I was having an incredible time. I thought it was so fun. You know what? I was actually so eager to talk about it. I completely skipped the fact that poor Rito Village is like covered in a blizzard. That's the whole
Oh
reason that
yeah,
we're doing this. So
totally forgot about that.
I was a little anxious to get to where we were going, but yeah, that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing is because the poor Rito are they're basically like frozen. They look like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. So
Oh my
we
God.
gotta find out the cause of this snowstorm, which is of course this big ship in the sky, which kind of looks like just a big cloud as you can see from the surface. But yeah,
Yeah.
I thought like ascending up there was like one of my highlights of playing Tears of the Kingdom so far, and I've played like 80 hours of this game,
Yeah,
and this was like
I would
one of the
agree.
highlights.
I would agree. It's really cool, and I love that. I we'll talk about this as we continue with the quote unquote dungeons and the phenomenon. But like, I love that Nintendo used different aspects of Hyrule rather than like the surface of Hyrule. So with Rito, it's up in the sky in this giant like blizzard cloud that you have to get up to descend into,
Yeah.
right? To get to the Storm Arc. But is that what it's called? Storm Arc? I can't
Storm Arc,
remember.
yeah. Let me confirm.
Um,
Let me confirm.
So I love that they, one of the first aspects is up in the sky, and then as we'll talk about with the Goron, it's down in the depths. So I just think that's really cool that they're using different aspects and locations for these dungeons. Because
Yeah.
I'll admit, when we were discussing if they were going to return to like more traditional dungeons, I was like, where are these dungeons going to go? Where are they going to? Because we've explored so much of Hyrule already in Breath of the Wild. Where are these going to go? And it totally makes sense what they did.
Yeah, there's literally only one dungeon on the surface, and
Hmm.
that dungeon, I'm sure I'm not surprising you which one it is, Al, but it makes sense, like where it actually pops up and why you wouldn't have seen it before. So very
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, so I was just like mesmerized, like enthralled. Like I said, this was the moment that like the sky portion to me kind of clicked and was like, okay, this can be awesome if this is kind of like what we're going for here, like these crazy ways to ascend up, up, up. Um,
Hmm.
and I would also, or I would almost argue that the game hasn't really recaptured that for me in terms of the sky portion. There have been some parts that are like quite fun, and we'll talk
Hmm.
about some of it next week. But I do think that like this one was so awesome that maybe it was almost too awesome. You know what I mean? Because like I haven't really got that same rush being in the sky. Maybe like with the Death Stars and with some of the labyrinths and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
definitely to a lesser extent, I feel like.
Yeah, I can see that. So maybe it's not, as I was saying, like this is your first kind of interaction of climbing up into the sky and interacting with the sky, but maybe it's like it's not a good thing that it's your first because some of the other things don't like hold up to it.
Hmm.
I think that like on your way to a dungeon, it makes sense for it to be as monumental as it was, and then the rest is more like shrine quests and the labyrinths, etc. So it feels fine to me, but I I can kind of agree with what you're saying, where maybe like the rest doesn't hold up quite as much.
Yeah, and again, it's not to say like it's not fun, it's not bad. I just think like
Right.
this is so awesome that it's a tough bar to overcome. Um, so eventually you do make your way into the Stormark ship, and I have a critique here. Why is this ship called the Wind Dungeon or the Wind Temple? Why not just call it like the Stormark ship? Actually, I feel like that's a critique that I have for almost every single dungeon in this game, except for maybe the Fire Temple. Is like, why are these called like just generic like Fire Temple, Water Temple? Like, give them some cool names. Come on.
Okay, yes, I can see that too, but I honestly was like I was really excited when I saw Wind Temple and when I saw Fire Temple and so on and so forth because it made me feel like I was returning to a more traditional Zelda. Like I get that they could have cooler names like we've had in past Zelda games, but we've also had like Ocarina of Time has some of the best dungeons ever and like they're just called like the Shadow Temple or the Fire Temple. You know what I mean? Or the Forest Temple.
Yes, however, I think that's a double-edged sword because it can work both ways because now you're inherently comparing this Wind Temple to another Wind Temple or this Fire Temple to another Fire Temple, which
Okay.
isn't exactly fair because like as we'll talk about when we talk about the dungeons in this game, which is another day. But like these are, open world Zelda type dungeons. Like there's no other way to say it. They're not traditional dungeons in the sense of like Ocarina or Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword dungeons. Like they're a modern Zelda dungeon. So which I think for the most part work exceptionally well in this game actually. But I do think that you do invite those comparisons, and it's a tough comparison to make if you've really been, and I think a lot of people were, where it's just like, I want traditional dungeons back. Because I can't say that these are traditional dungeons.
No, I can't say that either. I feel like there's a good, healthy, like, mix, like it's a hybrid, where they brought back traditional senses of dungeons with
I agree.
the Divine Beast kind of formula.
I agree. And I think that I think there's one dungeon that I was just like, oh, this is just like a Divine Beast. But like the Wind Temple here, I have to admit, like when Tulin was just like, oh, we got to activate the 5 whatevers that we need to activate, I was just kind of like, But I think that this dungeon and certainly some other dungeons actually like it's like a mix between traditional Zelda dungeon, like a Hyrule Castle from Breath of the Wild kind of dungeon, and a Divine Beast. And I think that the Wind Temple in particular, does a really good job of mixing those three. The Fire Temple, which we'll talk about in a bit, actually, to me, leans more in like the sense of like a traditional Zelda dungeon mixed with like Hyrule Castle. So they do it like a very good job, but I guess I don't know. I guess I'm just saying like it is. You invite those comparisons if you're, naming it the Wind Temple and not like, I don't know. I just think like the Stormark ship or whatever it is. Like I just think that sounds cool.
Yeah, I understand that. I can understand that. I did pop off when I saw Wind Temple though. I was just like, oh my gosh, it's like I felt like I was going back in the Zelda series a little bit, and I was excited for that. I will say that after doing 3 of these dungeons, and like not to get into too many depths about the details of these dungeons, but I do kind of wish that I could go back to a little bit more linear dungeon. Like I appreciate the open world. I understand like the formula that they have for this game works, but I do kind of miss like go find a key to get into this room, it's locked, that kind of thing. And maybe we don't need like the dungeon item to come back, but like I do miss some of those aspects of traditional dungeons that I think would be kind of cool in a game like this.
I do too. But I do think that, I do think that for this type of game, you do need to, what's a good word? Maybe modernize how you approach your dungeons. I think that all the shrines help with that as well. That kind of itch to like, you need to figure out a puzzle to get into the next room kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying they fully scratch it, but they help.
I just think that maybe my biggest reason for this is that it's too easy to cheese. It's too easy to kind of break. I wouldn't say break, but like to kind of get past the. Clearly, there's a puzzle you can solve here, but I was feeling this really hardcore with the water temple. There was so many things that I could do with the water temple where I just needed a hover bike and I could get to all the locations and fix it. But I forced myself not to because I wanted to experience it the first time, kind of like they wanted me to.
Yeah.
But now if I play Tears of the Kingdom again, I know how to cheese it. And I don't necessarily like that there's that option. I really wish that there was a more... sorry. What I mean is, like, I kind of would like to go back to that in the future, where it was just a little bit tougher. Yeah.
You can't just, like, completely break the game's physics and not even break, but, like, take advantage or utilize it.
Just cheat it. Yeah.
I know what you're saying. And we'll talk. We'll pick this conversation up when we talk about the actual dungeons, which I am stoked to talk about actually.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that the dungeon was very good, and the ending I thought was also very good. And the first time that you see this cutscene is great because then you learn about the imprisoning war, you learn about Rauru and his company taking on the Demon King, you learn about what it took to actually seal away the Demon King, and this. Like we were talking about, I don't know if we were on the show or not. I can't remember now. But we were talking about, like, I can't believe that, like, Tulin stays with you the entire time and, like, fights with you. Actually, so you remember that that Zelda Dungeon article that we did, like, the one final thing before Tears of the Kingdom comes out? I think Dave Lastby had written down, like, I want, like, a fellowship of party members. And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome, but I'm sure it's never going to happen.
Highly doubt it. Yeah.
Man.
And turns, lo and behold,
Yeah.
and like also getting that cutscene and having the return of the sages really like set me off too, because it was another one of those things where it was like classic Zelda modernized, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And then the sages like vow is what keeps them with you beyond the dungeon.
Yeah, it's awesome. I had an amazing time getting to the Wind Dungeon. I like I said, it almost ruined the sky for me because it was so fun actually, and I was just like, I cannot believe how high up I am. Oh my god! And like I thought that the dungeon itself was solid. I love Tulin. I would die for that little bird. And you know what? The Gust is a great ability. It's no Rivaldi's Gale, but it is helpful for sure.
It's very helpful. So again, without getting into too much details, but like with that cutscene and with them, the sages making the vow and how they get their secret stone and they make their vow and they grasp Link's hand and they like transfer their power, right? And it turns into a ring on his / Rauru's hand. Not gonna lie, I totally had a Captain Planet moment where I was like, we're gonna get all these sages rings, and with our powers combined, we're gonna save the planet. So like, I'm wondering if anybody else had that feeling.
Man, I'm just waiting for like Link to get all the rings, go up to Ganondorf, just be like, and watch him like fade away into nothingness, Thanos style.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this clip and want to see more of the Zelda Cast, make sure to head over to your favorite podcast platform of choice and subscribe. There are over 200 episodes in the vault that will provide you with hundreds of hours of Zelda content for you to enjoy. You can listen to us when you're on a walk, fighting Ganon, trying to sleep, whatever. And if you want to see these shows as they happen, make sure to head over to twitch.tv/the Zelda Cast, where you can watch our beautiful faces talk about Zelda every single week. Don't miss out, and we'll see you next time.